Right, good morning. I'm Professor Pang Weng San, Vice Dean Clinical Affairs, and together with me here in the studio are two students, Angeline from Year 2 and Mark from Year 4. I'll start off by doing an overview of the medical school itself, and then later on I'll pass it to the students to answer some of your questions and also talk to you about student life. I know there are quite a lot more of you out there watching in, looking in, and we hope that you have a good reception on your phones or your tablets and PCs and so on. Feel free to ask us questions later on. You can use Slido, you can use Facebook or whatever to answer, give us your questions. So I'm going to start off now talking about the medical school. Let me get my slides going. I'll give you a quick introduction of it. And I'll talk a bit about the MBBS curriculum. This is the Bachelor of Medicine, Bachelor of Surgery program that the LKCMedicine has worked with Imperial College London. Right? Now, it's a 5-year program, and National Healthcare Group is our main healthcare partner, but we do involve doctors and staff from the different institutions as well. I'll talk a bit about that later. Now, when we started this school some years ago, we didn't just take the Imperial program and brought it to Singapore. What we did was to work collaboratively with them, right, to develop a new program based on what we think may be needed for doctors of the future. We emphasize on a strong foundation in basic sciences, as well as early contact with patients. This is an overview of the curriculum. 3 main domains. The first domain covers the scientific basis of medicine, which is very important, very key, because medicine must be based on good science. Then the second domain is on clinical management and patient-centered care. And then thirdly, how do we deliver this care and what are the professional standards required? This is spread over 5 years. First 2 years, we focus a bit more on integrated science in the medical context. And then 3, 4, 5 are more about the clinical years, which I'll elaborate on. So this next slide shows you the years 1 and 2, integrated science and medical context. After introductory foundations of medicine, we will go into each of the organ systems. So you can see that we do cardiorespiratory, heart and lung, endocrine system, and then we talk about kidneys, we talk about muscles and skeletal systems. In year 2, we talk about reproductive systems, blood, infections, nervous systems, and then some of the smaller organs. We also look at phases of development from child health, mental health, aging, and then into the community as well, right? And throughout there'll be a lot of team-based learning and hands-on science practicals and all. Come year 3 onwards, you start doing what we call the clinical medicine. So you'll be going to the hospitals, to the healthcare clinics and all, focusing on medicine, surgery. When you see here surgery here, it doesn't mean you'll be operating on patients. You're learning about conditions that require surgery. You may learn some minor procedures and all that. Then there'll be a series of short postings as well. And during this period, we'll be tracking you in using an iFolio to see how well you are performing. You have core tutors as well, all right? Keeping an eye on you. Now, in year 4, there's a period called the scholarly projects, where you'll be able to do some research. It can be basic science research in the laboratories. It can be clinical research in the hospitals and wards or clinics, right? But it's a very important period because we want to train you how to do some basic research work. Then you start doing some postings in pediatrics, psychiatry, obstetrics and gynecology, family medicine, elderly care, emergency medicine as well, and that rounds up your year 4. Year 5 starts off with some what we call the electives, where here you have an opportunity to go overseas, spend a few weeks to see what healthcare is like in overseas countries. Some of you will get to go to Imperial, some of you might go to other places in UK or even in the US, or some of you might prefer to do electives in developing countries like India, right, where you get exposed to a different way of healthcare. Now you'll be supervised in all these programs as well. Then there'll be a period of selectives, where you can choose to look at some areas of interest within Singapore itself. Some of you might be interested in, say, surgery, some of you might be interested in the eye, some of you might be interested in elderly care. You do some selected postings of your interest, where we actually work with clinicians and learn a bit more about the postings. Then you come back to the school, you learn about prescribing again, and you go through a final round of integrated medicine and integrated care and surgery. This is to prepare you now for your final exams. After your final exams, you have what we call the student assistantship program, where you actually follow the doctors in the wards. You learn to be like house officers. You're getting ready to become house officers. At the end of that period, we have an iFolio to sign you up, and then you're ready for the real thing. You graduate and become real house officers, real doctors in the wards, right? Now, a bit about teaching pedagogy. We focus quite a bit on digital learning and team-based learning. We know you are a different generation, not like my generation who see through lectures. You are very dynamic, you want to have more self-learning, and we'll be providing you all that on a digital platform. At the same time, we know we also need to train you in clinical skills and good communication skills. How do you relate to patients? How do you talk to people and their families and all? Right, so a lot of focus on that. Even when it comes to anatomy, we are moving away from just dissections to you'll be handling real body specimens, but you'll also be learning about imaging, right, in learning anatomy, because one day you'll be needing to be able to read CT scans, MRI scans, and all that. Right? There's a lot of focus on early patient contact, as I mentioned earlier, which is very key. And lots of science practicals for you. We want to stimulate you into thinking about the science of medicine and all. Now, when it comes to clinical practice, you will be rotated through different hospitals in Singapore. It is important that you get exposed to different healthcare systems, from primary care right down to the hospitals, down to community hospitals, even hospices and so on. So you get a wide range of exposure. And this is important not only to train you to be a good doctor, but at the end of it in future, when you apply for residency program, we want you to be familiar with the different healthcare systems. That's why we move beyond one healthcare cluster to different healthcare clusters to widen your opportunities. So you get to see different hospitals and how they practice. Now, when it comes to Imperial opportunities, some of you will get a chance to go to Imperial College for an immersion week. Some of you may be doing electives elsewhere, right? And all graduates at the end of it, we want you to be good and ready for it. You need to be caring, competent, knowledgeable, good intimate communication skills. And I've been looking and tracking our alumni as well. They are doing very well. Quite a number of them, almost about 30-40% of them have really gone into residency, some starting this year, some starting next year. And you may see some of this in the website about how our alumni are doing. Now, we continue to have this strong Imperial College and LKCMedicine partnership. In fact, there's going to be a Transform MedEd conference coming up between the two of us, coming up in March. I'll say a few words now about admissions to LKCMedicine. First of all, we look at your academic qualifications, but you do need to do the BMed. So for those of you who have done the BMed last year, you can qualify to apply for medicine this year. And if you're thinking of applying for medicine next year, you must do the BMed in October this year. Following the BMed, there will also be a series of multiple medical interviews, right? And this is the process for the BMed application. You can see this in our website for the details and all. Remember, if you're applying for medicine next year, you must do the BMed this October. Now, this is the application period. So now's the period whereby you'll be getting all your A-level results, all that, so you can start applying for medical school, and we'll be arranging our interviews for you. These are some of the details of the minimum requirements for medical applications you can see on our website. Now, I must say that BMed is really very important because we want to assess not just your academic skills, but how well you can relate to people, how well you can communicate, how well you can think, critically as well. So these are the dates for the BMed for this year, and then when the results will come out. All these are on the websites. Now, these are the indicative BMed scores based on previous years. It doesn't mean that in your year this will be the BMed cutoff, because year on year it depends on the cohort. But it's just to give you some idea of where the 10th percentile and where the 90th percentile are. I must say that generally our Singapore students do very well in BMed. Right? It's quite challenging for us actually. You're all very good. Right? And because ours is very much focusing on not just the BMed but also the interviews and all, but there'll be some of you who are what we call the exceptional students. In other words, you might be national representative, might be playing games at the national level, right? You may be able to apply under this exceptional outstanding achievement type application, but it targets a very small number, right? Now, these are the framework of the multiple mini interviews. We're interested in your personal motivation, why you want to do medicine, problem-solving skills, communication skills, integrity, leadership skills, organization, and teamwork skills as well. So that comes out in the interviews as well. A few words about tuition fees. This is for the 2019 tuition fees. This year the data has not come out yet, but we stand advised by Ministry of Health and Ministry of Education on what the fees are, right? but this is a rough guide to it. But there are a lot of financial aid available, bursaries and offered both by different companies and all, and this is quite helpful for those of you who have financial concerns. There are several scholarships. We want to thank all the donors. Not only do we have a Nanyang scholarship, an LKCMedicine scholarship, but we have generous donations from Token Tree Foundation, Sim Yong Chong, Irene Chang Liang King as well. Alright, there's also ASEAN scholarship for ASEAN students. So this is quite helpful for those of you who do well and are capable of getting some of these scholarships. You'll find some of our brochures online as well. You can scan this for your e-brochures, right? And I've given quite a rapid, quick overview. Later on, we can explore your questions and all. I'm going to hand you over to our students now, starting with Angeline from Year 2. Angeline, how are yours?
Hi, I'm Angeline. I'm a Year 2 medical student.
Hi, I'm Mark. I'm a Year 4 medical student.
And today we'll be talking more about life at LKCMedicine. So first, I'll be talking about student life, which comprises of our house system, hall life, and community service. So in LKC, when you join, you'll be put into one of 5 houses. So there's Lim Boon King, the blue house, Marie Curie, the yellow house, William Ter, the black house, Alexander Fleming, the green house, or William Osler, the red house. So for me, I belong to Marie Curie, the yellow house. And what's unique about the LKC house system is that it is a huge part of our support system. So we have many inter-house and intra-house events organized by the school to help bond us together, such as sports day, unsports day, and orientation. And on top of that, each house still gets to bond closer together through informal house outings. So for me, my house will regularly meet up for dinner in hall. And in fact, we grew so close, we even went to Bali together, as you can see in the picture. So another unique part about this house system is how we have the concept of house families. So a group of 5 to 6 of us within the house will be tagged to another senior house family, and this senior house family will be tagged to their seniors. So through this whole line of house families, we have some seniors we know whom we can turn to for support and guidance when we are unsure of how to make certain decisions in med school or how to cope. So that's very useful. So another huge part of student life is hall life. So when you join LKCMedicine, you'll be sorted to either Pioneer Hall or Crescent Hall. And your first activity you take part in is hall orientation, where you get to meet people from other faculties outside of medicine and have fun together. So through there, you can make friends that can follow you to hall activities. So if you're interested in dance, there's an event called the Hall Olympiad Closing Ceremony that the hall dance would train for, which is an inter-hall dance competition between the 24 halls. And if you're more sporty, you can take part in hall sports. There are a wide variety of hall sports such as squash, tennis, and water polo. And if you're more recreational like me, you can join them to just enjoy yourself and not compete also. So if you're more musically inclined, you can join jam band, where you can sing or play the keyboard. And if you would like to give back to the hall community, you can join a hall council to organize events for the students. So there are many opportunities to do community service in LKC. So we have more than 10 overseas community involvement projects. And our students go to places such as Sri Lanka, Nepal, and Thailand. And I think it's a good experience for students to explore a different healthcare system and to pick up some clinical skills from the doctors who follow us on the trip. Yes. And we also have many local community involvement projects, such as health screening, organized by LKC Cares, which is LKC's very own health screening project. Or for me, I'm part of Project Angel, a project where we try to expose medical students more to special needs individuals and to better understand their needs. So if the projects in school are not to your liking, you can take part in many external projects also. I have friends who are in the NTU Welfare Services Club, and they very much enjoy serving there also. Okay, so as for academic life, years 1 and 2 will be the preclinical years where we mostly have our TBL sessions, and years 3 to 5 will be clinical, will be more clinical, where we spend more time in the ward. So I'll be covering the preclinical segment. So what is great about the LKC curriculum is that we have early clinical exposure. So as early as 4 weeks into medical school, we'll have hospital week or polyclinic week where we are attached to a hospital or polyclinic to better understand how the hospital or polyclinic is run and to understand the different roles that the healthcare professionals play. So I think that was a very interesting experience for many of us because we have not spoken to patients before that. And the first time is definitely terrifying, but after that exposure, it really helped us to improve our communication skills and to provide some context into what we are going to learn for the next 2 years. So interspersed within our curriculum are many foundations of clinical practice sessions where we where we learn more about physical examinations, such as examining the cardiovascular system, and we learn practical skills such as trying to suture a small wound or to administer injections. And we also have clinical communications sessions where we practice our history taking with simulated patients. So that is very helpful to prepare us for our clinical years. So the hallmark of the LKC curriculum is team-based learning. So it comes from the flipped classroom concept. So a typical team-based learning session would start off with IRA, the Individual Readiness Assessment, which is like a small test to test our understanding of the knowledge we have gathered. So before each lesson, we will watch lecture videos online to gain the information, gain the knowledge first. Then we will apply it in class through the IRA, and afterwards we'll come together as a team to find out the correct answer to the questions through discussion. And if there are still questions that we cannot resolve as a team, we will pose our questions to the content experts present, which might be a doctor or a scientist who will answer our questions in the burning question segment. Then we will apply our knowledge in the application exercises. So lessons in LKC are structured according to blocks compared to like learning anatomy, physiology, or pathology in separate blocks. And I find that this is very useful when it is structured according to systems because we can see the links within a system and between the systems. So in team-based learning, we work as a group of 6 together, and on top of attending lessons together, such as our TBL sessions, anatomy, or foundations of clinical practice, we also meet up outside of class to practice together, and the team is really what you make it out to be. So they can be your tightest group of friends in LKC also, and they also form an important support system. Yes. So now I'll hand over to Mark, who will be talking about clinical years.
Yes, so I'll now be talking about the clinical years, which comprise of the scholarly project and our clinical postings. So starting off the scholarly project, so it's a 6 weeks research project that you get to do in year 4. So this is actually a chance to do research. So you actually get to choose between 4 domains, which are laboratory research, medical practice, medical education, and medical humanities. So for me personally, I did a project on exploring antimicrobial resistance trends across gram-negative pathogens. So looking at how the trends of resistance have been rising across the world. So you actually get to choose from a wide selection of projects across different healthcare and research institutions, and you get to learn new research skills and get exposed to medical research. And you can have the opportunity to present your project at the celebratory evening and other relevant research conferences as well. So going on to clinical postings, you'll get the opportunity to do the different clinical postings that Prof Pang mentioned earlier in the 3 clusters in Singapore. So namely that of National Healthcare Group, SingHealth, and National University Health System. So what you actually get to do is you get to do all the clinical postings like internal medicine, general surgery, and all of the different clinical postings across all the hospitals and specialist clinics. So our primary healthcare partner is National Healthcare Group. So you will be posted to Tan Tock Seng Hospital or Khoo Teck Puat Hospital, National Skin Centre for Dermatology, and Institute of Mental Health for psychiatry posting. And you also get the chance to be rotated to other hospitals like SGH, NUH, and KK Women's and Children's Hospital, specifically for pediatrics and obstetrics and gynecology. And of course, you'll get rotated to the polyclinics across Singapore for exposure to primary care. So the main knowledge you'll learn about clinical postings is that you'll learn how all the clinical knowledge from all the different postings come together, because you'll come to realize that this clinical knowledge is cumulative and it builds upon the knowledge that you have learned in previous clinical postings. So for example, what you have learned in internal medicine and general surgery in year 3 will be applied and quite useful for your clinical posting in emergency medicine, in geriatric medicine, and in family medicine that you'll be undertaking in year 4. And you'll also be applying the knowledge that you have learned in year 1 and year 2 in your lectures and tutorials and TBL sessions in your clinical postings as well. So you'll be learning mainly about common conditions and dangerous conditions and how to examine, investigate, and manage them when you become a doctor in the future. So the main clinical skills that you'll be learning is namely how to function on the job as a future doctor. So how to think, how to examine patients, how to perform clinical skills. So a lot of this will be applied from what you have learned in year 1 and year 2. Of course, you'll continue learning about them in year 3 to year 5, but you'll be applying all these foundations of clinical practice skills to your clinical postings. And you'll also get the opportunity to talk to patients, understand their journey, understand their experiences, their ideas, their concerns, their expectations, and how they actually feel about their sickness and how they actually journey towards the road of recovery. And you'll also get an opportunity to learn and work with a multidisciplinary team of healthcare professionals and from doctors to nurses to pharmacists, and you'll get to learn about how they all play a very important role in getting the patient back to health. So life as a clinical student is mainly about going through ward rounds. So you'll go early in the morning, maybe 7 to 8 a.m., and then you will take history from them, find out why they are in the hospital, perform any relevant physical examinations that may be required, and then you have the opportunity to present your clinical findings to the healthcare team as well. And there's a lot of observation and learning from the healthcare team that you are rounding with in the hospital. And of course, you will also have the opportunity to attend outpatient clinics, so you'll see how healthcare is delivered in the outpatient setting as well. And you also have the opportunity to attend tutorials. Bedside tutorials are mainly tutorials by literally by the patient's bedside, where you actually learn from the patient's history and physical examination findings. And you also have didactic tutorials, which can take the place of lectures or tutorials as well. And of course, there will be TBL sessions similar to year 1 and year 2. So there's a lot of learning and practicing of clinical skills is in the clinical years. So the same as year 1 and year 2, you would have a TBL team of 6 as well. And within this TBL team of 6, you will be learning from each other, you would be practicing with each other, and basically you'll be a very close-knit team where you will have the opportunity to refine your clinical skills during the clinical postings. So this is actually my team's photo. So some of us went to Khoo Teck Puat, Changi General Hospital for our general surgery posting, and this is our team photo from the pediatrics posting as well. So you also get the opportunity to learn from many dedicated doctors and tutors who have taken time out of their busy clinical schedule to tutor us and to teach us more about the cases that we have seen. So you would be in very good hands in terms of the knowledge and the clinical expertise that they will impart to you. And of course, out of clinical postings, you would have the opportunity to bond with your teammates and your friends on a closer level. So you can actually go to different food places after clinical postings, and you get to explore different eateries, and can also have fun outings. So the picture on the top right hand corner is a team outing where we actually went to Bishan Ang Mo Kio Park, for instance. I would like to talk a bit more about the Imperial connection, because Imperial College London is actually one of our parent universities. So we do have the opportunity to visit Imperial College London and its partner hospitals in year 2 during the exchange program, and in year 5 as well during the overseas electives. So we actually get the opportunity to learn from their students, and we get the opportunity to learn more about their healthcare system, which is actually quite different from ours in Singapore. So their healthcare system is the National Health Service, also known as the NHS, and we'll get to learn more about how it functions. So the main partner hospitals that Imperial works with are Charing Cross, Chelsea and Westminster, Hammersmith, St. Mary's and West Middlesex. So during your exchange there, you may have the opportunity to rotate into one of these hospitals and learn from their doctors there. So we have now moved on to the Q&A session, and we can have a look at what questions that you have. You can post it on Slido or on the social media platforms as well.
Right, thanks Angeline and Mark. So now we have about half an hour to address some of your questions. I know some of you have already been sending questions, so let's have a look at some of this, right? So the first question here that I'm seeing on the screen here is that what are the traits, aspects you look for when accepting students? I think that's a very good question. A couple of things I would comment on. First of all, academically you must be good. And that's why we look at your academic results, how well you do in your A-levels and all that. Having said that, we look at all the applicants that come to us. A lot of them are straight A's and a lot of them are really very good students, right? Second thing we look at is your personality, how well you're able to relate to people. As a doctor, you need to be speaking to people, understanding their needs and so on. So how well you communicate, how well you relate to. We also look at your motivation for doing medicine. Why are you looking at doing medicine? What is your intent? What do you want to do in future? So we look at that as well. So in our interviews, in our assessment, we look at a combination of how good you are academically, as well as what kind of personality you have, what drives you, how well you communicate, how you think when we give you a problem to solve. All right, those are some aspects we look at. All right, so that's very broad comments on that. All right, I'm sure you agree with me. I've got two very good students here, and it took us quite a bit to interview them and assess them and brought them to the medical school, and I'm sure they will do well. Right? Okay, let's look at what are some of the other questions. Do keep them coming, even if we can't answer all your questions now. We'll try to answer them at a later time and all. What are the chances of a non-JC student entering LKCMedicine? I'm not sure whether you are referring to IB programs and all that. Certainly IB programs do come in. We've got quite a few students both from JC and from IB. If you're asking about polytechnic students, so far I think we did have a couple of polytechnic students. In fact, one of them has already graduated, and I'm hearing good feedback about him as well. But generally I think it's very competitive, I must say. So you really need to do very well if you're a poly student, right, in order to qualify and come in. But we are not close to that, all right? I think we'll address that question. Will MMI be conducted differently this year due to COVID-19? Now, we have discussed this at our school. To us, MMI is very important, right? We do want to make sure that we are able to assess well the students that are coming to medical school. So we've decided that we will not change the MMI. We'll still be doing face-to-face interviews and all, but we have to make sure that this is done in a way which is safe. In other words, because some of our interviewers are clinicians and all that, we make sure that we are safe to meet you in person, right? But we will still be conducting MMI as before, but putting in some processes to make sure that you will not be affected in this COVID period. Overseas opportunities, I think Mark has talked a bit about visit to Imperial. Anything else you want to add, Mark, about your visit? Yeah.
I think other than visit to Imperial, you also have the opportunity to attend other overseas electives as well if you would like to go to other countries other than Imperial. So during the overseas elective period, you can go to countries in Australia, in Japan, or in developing countries as well, in India, in Thailand as well. So you get it's largely based on what your preference is and what you want to see in a different healthcare system as well. Yeah.
Right, there's a question on whether there's a difference in career between the YL graduate and LKC medicine graduate. At the end of it, after 5 years, we're targeting the same endpoint. Right? In other words, in 5 years, the student that graduates must be ready for practice as a house officer in the hospital system in Singapore. So our endpoint is the same. Now, beyond that, when it comes to residency, again, they're put into the common pool. So once you graduate, you are no longer LKC or YL, you are a doctor in the Ministry of Health Holdings, right, working in the Singapore healthcare system. So both graduates will have equal opportunities in terms of applying for residency programs. Right? So that's our endpoint that we look at. I hope that answers your question. Okay, the next question again related to the similarities and differences between the YL and the LKC medicine program. Now, when we first started the medical school, in fact, we started discussion 10 years ago now actually, before the first class came in 2013. We were asking ourselves, what do we need to do, right, to create a doctor of the future? So we looked at the YL program, we also looked at the Imperial program, and we said, what else can we change in order to meet the needs of the future? So LKC, because our classes were small at that time, we had the opportunity to revamp the way we deliver our curriculum. So we know that the next generation is very IT savvy. They're not about giving lectures, taking lecture notes and all. We know they want things that are more interactive, more hands-on. So we started exploring a lot about digital learning, right? How do you use IT systems? How do you have more team-based discussions, team-based learning, rather than a lecture system and tutorial system and all. So with that, we hope to deliver graduates which are already a bit more prepared for future healthcare. That's what we try to look at, all right? Having said that, medical schools worldwide are also revamping themselves, changing themselves. So even in YL, they're also looking at revamping some of the way they're delivering teaching as well. So all of us are progressing. At the end of it, we're trying to say, whatever system you go through, how do we deliver a good doctor ready for healthcare in Singapore? Right? So that's our same aim. Right? Okay, Imperial is 6-year program, LKC medicine is 5-year program. Why? Now, Imperial adds on a year of research right in their program. So you can actually spend 1 year focusing on research and all. Whereas in Singapore, we'll focus on a 5-year program and smaller, less time spent on research itself. Now, partly because in Singapore there was a need to really produce doctors to meet the healthcare needs. As you are aware, our population is aging, more hospitals are being built. Now we have 3 major healthcare clusters, but several more hospitals. I think I showed a slide with 15 healthcare institutions. So Singapore does need to meet the requirements of filling these hospitals with good doctors as well. So in a sense, we have taken the 1-year research program out of this. But it doesn't stop any of the students from wanting to say, I'm going to defer my professional work. I'm going to take a year off to do some research first. You can do that, but you have to work that out with Ministry of Health because you have a bond that you need to work out with Ministry. Right? So that's where the difference is. Okay, of course, everybody is concerned about COVID-19 and job shadowing and all now. If you look at our current students today, yes, some of them are affected. I'm going to ask my students later to give some views about how they're experiencing this because they can't go to the wards at the moment. We're concerned about their safety and all, right? But we have to look at delivering the pedagogy in different ways. Now, as for those of you applying for medicine, we're keeping our fingers crossed. We hope there's no COVID next year. All right, and we hope that things will be stabilized and all, right? So maybe I hand you over to Mark now to talk a bit about your challenges now. Right?
Yes, so currently clinical postings are suspended in view of DORSCON Orange because of COVID-19. So there's a lot of e-learning and a lot of learning from online resources and from the resources that the tutors are giving us. So in terms of what we are learning, the tutors have actually taken some time out of their clinical schedule to have video conferencing tutorials with us, and so we get the chance to interview simulated patients across video conferencing, and also lectures and tutorials over video conferencing as well. So that is one of the ways that the school and hospitals are getting around the constraints of limiting face-to-face contact in view of this COVID-19 outbreak. And also, there's even though we do not have opportunities for clinical posting and clinical experience now, but I feel that the tutors have really tried to make up for it by focusing on what the skills needed in history taking, for example, the common conditions that we'll be seeing in clinics and in the wards as well, and trying to impart their experience to us. So on that sense, there's the core content is largely covered in the online tutorials and in the video conferencing tutorials. And of course, there will still be lessons that can be held in our main campus in school, and there can be also simulations that can be done in school as well, in order to have a hands-on experience as well. So not everything is done at home. There are some lessons and some simulation sessions which are also done in school to make up for the lack of clinical postings currently.
Right, we're also looking at whether we can do makeup postings in future when this scenario improves. So I'm going to move on to the next question. It talks about whether every student gets to go to Imperial or there's a selection process. Now our classes are getting bigger now. We started with 54 students initially, and now we're taking 150 students. So it is not possible for us to send all 150 to Imperial, and Imperial can't take 150 of our students too. So I'm going to ask again Mark to talk about how do you end up being selected for the Imperial attachment.
Okay, so the school does conduct a selection. So it's based on my year. It's based on a write-up and the ideas that you have to improve the collaboration between Imperial and LKCMedicine, and basically what contributions you have made and what you have done in your period in the school so far. So I think the school does have its own internal selection, and they would also select the students in consultation with Imperial as well. So in terms of the selection for the exchange program, that's how it goes. For the elective program, there's also an application that needs to be submitted to Imperial, which will also select on their end. And not everybody wants to go to Imperial, as I mentioned earlier, because some of them do want to experience a different healthcare system other than the NHS. So for instance, you'll see different kinds of conditions in say India or in Thailand. You'll see many conditions that you do not see in the developed world. So in terms of that, some people do not choose to go to Imperial. But the short answer is, if you would like to go to Imperial, there is a selection process which is conducted by both Imperial side and LKCMedicine side.
Okay, I'm looking at some of the other questions now. Okay, this is a very relevant question, because I think some of the current students, meaning yourselves, have been looking at job shadowing before your interviews. And now that you have no opportunity to do job shadowing, will that affect your applications or not? The answer is no, it will not affect, in a sense that we do not determine whether a student should be admitted based on whether they had a job shadowing or not. All right. The purpose of job shadowing is not for us to see whether you should come into medicine, but rather for you to get a feel of what is it like to be in healthcare. Now, I also understand that not every student gets a chance to do job shadowing, right? Some people apply to hospitals to get attachment and they can't. So it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter. It's not a requirement. maybe I'll ask Angeline about your experience with job shadowing at that time. Did that help you? And
Well, for me, I managed to have a job shadowing opportunity at a hospital. But I also know other friends who have not done job shadowing at all and are still in LKC medicine. And on the other hand, I have friends who did multiple job shadowing stints, but they still did not get into medicine. So really, it is more about how well you can communicate and your leadership skills and your motivations for joining medicine and how well you perform in the interview that matters more than the job shadowing stints that you have done. Yes.
maybe I should pause this moment to mention something which I think I should mention. Being a doctor is not the only way to serve in healthcare. There are a lot of opportunities. You can be a nurse, you can be a pharmacist, right? You can be a physiotherapist, occupational therapist. There are a whole range of healthcare professions. And increasingly we find that nowadays in healthcare, you need teamwork, right? It's not just about doctor and a patient, but the doctor working with the team, looking after patients, right? And can be equally satisfying doing other work as well in terms of healthcare. So really moving more towards healthcare as a team, not just a doctor and patient. Think about that, right? Okay, let's see what other questions there are. Okay, the question relates to like how competitive are LKC medicine graduates in terms of residency program. For those who may not be aware, let me talk a bit about residency program. Now, after you finish training in medical school, you become a junior doctor, but you are not a specialist. So residency program is about training to become a specialist. So whether you want to train to become a physician, a cardiologist, a surgeon, even a radiologist or something, that's what we call a residency training program. Residency training program, the basic residency is 3 years, followed by another 2 to 3 years of senior residency program. And you need to apply to go into them. Now, whether there's a difference between LKC and YLL, well, we've only graduated 2 batches so far. I don't see a difference. Almost about 30-40% of our LKC grads in the first 2 batches have already been accepted into residency program or started residency program, right? Now, what's important is that we always tell our students, don't rush into residency program. Develop yourself as a good general doctor first. Because once you enter residency program, you tend to narrow down into a particular field, right? And then you lose out in terms of your general exposure. So always take your time, get a good exposure first, then you become a better specialist in future with some background knowledge in other ways. At this point in time, we don't see a difference between the 2 schools, right? Okay, I think some next question has to do with the method of teaching. Now, so when it comes to methods of teaching, I'm going to ask my students to give their feedback because they are the ones experiencing and trying out this new system. So yeah, maybe I could ask either one of you to start talking about how do you find TBL, team-based learning, right?
So maybe I'll share more first because our syllabus is organized according to body systems in the preclinical years. So as for TBL, each of us will be given an iPad mini when we enter med school, and that's where we watch our online lecture videos before coming to class. So as mentioned in the presentation just now, when we enter class, we will first take a short test to assess our knowledge of how much we have learned from the lecture materials online. And what I like about having the lecture materials online is that you can choose to speed up or slow down the lecturer's pace if you to suit your learning needs, and you can always revise the material at any point in time. So if I choose to study at 2 a.m., I can still go back to the materials, and I don't have to turn up for like fixed lecture time slots to learn. So that flexibility is really good if you prefer more like independent learning. As for learning by body systems, yes, and someone else has also asked, our exams also by body systems. So yes, in year 1, we learn the cardiovascular system, the respiratory system, the musculoskeletal system, and the renal-endocrine system. So our exams will only be tested on these systems and not the other systems which we will learn in year 2. And so we have 2 papers for our exams. So the first paper will comprise of 2 systems, and the other paper will comprise of and the other 2 systems. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Right, next question is on how do I get a full scholarship and what's the intake size this year? So this year we are targeting, as far as I know, 150 students, right? Same as the previous class. Ministry of Health normally advises us what's the numbers that they want us to take. Now, when it comes to the scholarship, what we do is that we'll look at your BMAT, we'll look at how well you do in the MMI, right? And then we'll select you up for an interview. And from there, we'll decide whether we should award you the scholarship or not. So it's really based on how you perform, both at the interviews, both at the your BMAT, as well as your background, in your school as well. Okay. All right. Any other questions? Let's see. What's the weightage of section 1, 2, 3 of BMAT? Well, I think that one you leave it to us. We'll normally look at your overall BMAT score. And the BMAT score really just allows you to come in for the interviews. And we look at the MMI instead. All right. I'm giving a bit of time for the question to come up. Yeah. The question was whether do we consider only scores when accepting students. As I said, we take your BMAT scores as a guide to let us decide whether to bring you up for interviews. Then we look at your MMI performance after that. Alright, so the MMI performance is very important. Generally, when it comes to BMAT, our experience is that Singapore students do very well. So many of you have very good BMAT scores, right? So from there, the MMI then gives us another layer to understand you a bit better, understand your motivation, see who you are. Then we decide from there whether you should come to medical school or not, right? Okay, so there's a question about the degree, because we are joined with Imperial College. The degree is jointly conferred but not recognized in UK. Now, once a person graduates from medical school, whether they can practice or not is then determined not by the medical school but by the respective medical councils. So in Singapore Medical Council will determine who to accept, right? Whether the MBBS in Singapore, whether you study from, say, an overseas country, whether would the degree be recognized also by Singapore Medical Council. Likewise, in the UK, it's determined by the UK's General Medical Council, GMC. Right? So at this point in time, our LKC graduate is not yet recognized by GMC. So you cannot go there and start practicing as a doctor. Right? In future, it may vary, we do not know. But at the end of it, the focus is this. When you are a graduate of LKC, right? Because it's a heavily Singapore government-sponsored program, you do have a bond to work in Singapore here. Right? You have a 5-year bond that you must clear after your PGY1. And that actually allows you sometimes to do your residency locally as well. Right? So no worries about having to go overseas and all that. Complete your training here first. Okay. Do MMI questions require prior medical knowledge? Right? Actually, okay, let me ask my students, will you ask medical questions or anything in your MMI?
Actually, no. What the MMI looks out for is what you already have. So it mainly looks out for your personality, your leadership skills, your communication ability, and your empathy. So you don't have to intensively prepare for that and just be yourself. So there's another question about how you can prepare for the interview. So LKCMedicine has a MMI YouTube channel. So you can check out the YouTube channel to find out more about how the interviews are structured, so you will not be too overwhelmed when you turn up for the interview on the day itself. Yes.
Mark, do you remember your interview? How was the experience like?
During my interview, there are, I think it's the same as Angeline, there are different stations, and these stations would test at the same things as what Angeline mentioned just now, like empathy, how you can communicate with others, how you can do problem solving on the spot, and all these kind of skills that you would need as a doctor in the future. So no, you do not need specialist medical knowledge for the MMI.
I'm quite sure you agree with me that my 2 students sitting next to me were the right choices. Now, so indeed in the MMI, just be yourself. All right, don't worry too much about things. just be yourself, talk naturally, right? And we're really looking at, whether you are likely to be somebody who can relate well to patients, somebody who can cope well academically, someone who can think critically. So just be yourself, all right? And then we'll try and do a fair assessment of you. There's a question here about what's the core vital value of being a doctor. At the end of it, I think, looking back, I've been practicing for almost, come to think of it, 30, 40 years now, right? At the end of it, I think, as a doctor, first of all, you have a responsibility for patients. You have a responsibility to look after patients, so you do need to know your medicine well, right? We don't want to feel that we have missed out doing our best for patients because we didn't know enough, right? Now, of course, we don't expect every doctor to know everything, so doctors work as teams. But being able to assimilate knowledge and apply the knowledge is important. That's the first step. Then secondly, as a doctor, you must ask yourself, how are you treating patients? How do you see patients? Do you see them as people? Do you see them as just subjects of diseases and all? So that doctor-patient relationship is very important. We must have this willingness to care for patients, as human beings, as people who are in need, and you are here to help them, right? So that communication skill, that relationship, that perspective of being a doctor is also important. So you need to balance between the science of medicine and the art of medicine. Sure, you don't develop that naturally, right? We'll cultivate and grow that in you, but first of all, you must be the type of person whom we think are able to be trained to do all this more and more, all right? And then you learn as you move along, because as a doctor, you'll find that you'll make mistakes, all right? You'll have errors in your practice and all, but you learn to cope, you learn to be resilient and continue pressing on. I look at my colleagues during this period of the COVID. Many of them are out there doing their best. They are putting themselves at risk of getting infection themselves. So what drives them? What makes them be able to just continue doing what they are doing? Right? It's back to core values of who you are, why you did medicine in the first place. Right? So it's very important. Ask yourself, why do you want to do medicine? And that's the important part of it. It must be about caring for people. It must be about helping people. Otherwise, you will not do well as a doctor. Right? Okay, any other questions to look at? I know our time is almost up. If you have other questions, feel free to continue using Slido. There's also, by the way, there's also another session at 2 p.m. this afternoon. All right, a similar session, but one of my colleagues will be doing the talk instead. You can still listen to it again. You can still ask further questions at that time. All right. What is the emphasis on BMAT compared to Poly GPA? They are very different, all right? Your Poly GPA, A levels, all those results are looked at separately. BMAT is very important. We look at it differently as well. Would there be a rescheduled MMI if it conflicts with NS scheduling? Well, we have several sessions of MMI, including weekends as well. So in fact, many of the NS boys do turn up on Sundays to do the MMI instead. All right, so we'll keep to that period of MMIs and try to cope with all of you during that period. Now, how many candidates select the MMI this year? Okay, I think we're looking at a figure, but generally we throw a wide net as well. So offhand, I can't tell the figure offhand. But yes, we do have quite a number of MMI sessions. Will CCA be looked at, right? Generally, CCA is a reflection of your participation, your leadership skills, right? Your engagement. We do look at some of your CCA as well, but it's not so critical. And of course, I must ask my students, what CCA were you involved in? Do you think that helped you come into medical school?
Okay, so for me, in JC, I was involved in current affairs and economic society. I was also involved in quite a bit of science research, which was out of my curriculum actually. So in terms of CCA, it does help you in a sense if you, as Prof mentioned in the aptitudes based assessment, if you do have very outstanding achievements that you like to highlight in your application, I think that the admissions committee would take that into consideration. But I also do think that they will also consider other aspects of the application as well, such as your A-level or your poly GPA or your any other relevant qualifications, and of course the BMAT score and your performance at the multiple mini interviews as well. Yeah.
Yeah, I think ultimately there's no certain CCA that you should join just to get into medicine. The CCA is a reflection of your interests and who you are as a person, which the interview panel wants to find out more about also.
Yeah, maybe I just add a bit more. For the CCA, I think it may help you in your multiple mini interview, in the sense that when they ask you to share certain experiences, you can draw on those experiences. But in terms of what specific achievements you should get, there isn't really a fixed achievement. It's mainly based on your interests and based on what kind of values you learn from those activities that you participate in, be it maybe leadership or how to communicate with people and how to problem solve, for example.
I should also emphasize that we do want diversity in healthcare. We don't want every doctor to be the same, coming from the same mold, the same type. Because later on, when you look into the different specialties, there are surgical specialties, there are medical specialties, there are other specialties, and different personalities will fit different subspecialties as well. So we need to have a very diverse group coming into the class. So there's no fixed mode that we look at. We look at basic principles of how well you do academically, what kind of person you are, right, and whether you're able to communicate, relate well to people, critical thinking, right? Those are general principles, broad strokes we look at, but not everybody is the same. Okay, are students stuck in one group or will they be rotated? All right, this one is a question I must give to the student. Tell me about how you felt about this. Yeah.
So for TBL, we every year there's a rotation that takes place. So you don't get to select your teammates. The school would select the teammates and will group you in teams of 6 students. And I feel that that is it helps you meet new people and to get to know new people. And anyway, since our batch is quite small, by the end of first year, you actually know everybody in the batch by name. Yeah, so because healthcare is largely team-based, in the real world, you don't get to select who you work with. So I guess if you do not really like the person that you are grouped with, you would still need to learn how to work together. Yeah, so I think that's a important part and an important reason why there's this team-based learning, how to work with people, how to discuss issues, how to reason things out, and that is actually a lot of what goes on during the TBL session and in the application exercise, where you discuss and come up with an answer that your group feels is the best, and then you justify the answer. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess even though there might be potential for conflict, most groups, if not all groups, turn out quite well, and people are quite productive together in class and even outside of class. Most teams would still like meet up together and practice together and have fun together. Yes.
Right. So then another reason why we group them into groups and change the groups is to actually train you for real life. Because in real life, they're going to move from hospitals to hospitals, departments to departments. You'll be joining different teams. You learn to work with different people as well. So this team-based learning really helps to prepare you for the future. Now there's one last question here before we close the session. And there's a question is whether can students transfer from LKC to Imperial? But at this point in time, the answer is no. Because at the end of it, when you complete your training, you do have to work back in Singapore. So we do want you to be familiar with the Singapore healthcare system. Ministry of Health imposes a bond which you have to complete. Right, so with that, we are going to round off the session. I want to thank you all for listening in. We hope that we've addressed most of your questions. But if you have any further questions, do use Slido, all right, to continue to give us your questions using the code LKCMedicine. And we look forward to more questions from you. And there's another session in the afternoon that's coming up. I'd like to round up by just summarizing what we have done so far. We started planning for the school 10 years ago, actually, when we signed the agreement with Imperial College. Then we've delivered already 2 batches of graduates. The 3rd class is graduating very soon this year. And then the 8th class will be coming in. So I think we've learned a lot over the years, and I think we've done a reasonably good job in delivering good medical graduates. right? We have been continually evolving, improving on our programs and all, and we're now ready to continue to develop this even further, right? I think we've achieved quite a lot, not just in terms of graduates, but there's also a lot of background work in terms of linking up with NTU and with other faculties for research as well. If you go into our website, you see a lot of work that our researchers have done, and this also contributes back to the medical school. So I think LKC Medicine, together with Imperial College London, we have a very good relationships, and we'll continue to develop and evolve this as well. So thank you very much for listening in to us. As I said, any further questions, do send it to us, and you can join us again at the session in the afternoon at 2 o'clock. So I do want to thank my two students who have taken the time to come to be with us as well, and thank you for listening in. Thank you very much. Right?